What is stress? Stress is a negative emotional state occurring in response to events that are perceived as taxing or exceeding a person's resources or ability to cope. Examples of stress can include regular daily hassles like road construction, spilling your drink, losing your keys, and running late for an important event. Other examples of stressors would be change in one's life events like important milestones, and traumatic events such as abuse, sexual assault, or natural disasters. Another stressor, burnout, is an unhealthy condition caused by chronic, prolonged work stress that is characterized by exhaustion and a sense of failure or inadequacy. There are many social and cultural sources of stress. For example, socioeconomic status, racism, and microaggressions, and adapting to a new culture like foreign exchange students are all sources of stress. People in lower socioeconomic status groups have the highest levels of psychological distress, illness, and premature death. More than 3/4 of African American adolescents reported being treated differently due to their race. A culture of stress is a stress that results from pressure of adapting to a new culture. A person's attitudes are important in determining how much a culture of stress is experienced. When integration occurs, individuals continue to value their original culture but also seek to become part of the dominant society, and this contributes to very low levels of stress. Assimilated individuals give up their own culture and try to become part of the new culture, and this contributes to moderate levels of stress. Separated individuals maintain their old culture identity and avoid contact with the new culture, and this causes high levels of stress. Marginalized individuals lack cultural and psychological contact with their own culture and the new culture, and this is associated with the highest degree of stress. The hypothalamus and the sympathetic nervous system are both involved in the body's response to stress. The flight or fight response is a rapidly occurring chain of internal physical reactions that prepare people to either fight or take flight from an immediate threat. The fight or flight response involves both the sympathetic nervous system and the endocrine system. With the perception of a threat, the hypothalamus activates the sympathetic nervous system, which stimulates the adrenal medulla to secrete hormones. This pathway helps ensure survival by quickly mobilizing internal physical resources to defensively attack or flee an immediate threat.
Catecholamines are secreted by the adrenal medulla and are hormones that cause a quick and rapid physiological response. Examples of these hormones can include adrenaline and norepinephrine. As discussed earlier, these hormones are involved in the fight or flight response and consequently trigger the bodily response, which can include changes in heart rate or dilated pupils. Another stress-related hormone comes from long-term stress and is secreted by the pituitary gland called adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH. Prolonged and chronic stress opens up the second endocrine pathway, which allows for the release of ACTH. Subsequently, ACTH activates the adrenal cortex to secrete even more stress-related hormones called corticosteroids, commonly including cortisol. Short-term exposure to these hormones can be beneficial as they can reduce inflammation and enhance muscle tone, but long-term exposure has an adverse effect that can in turn weaken body systems and further lower immunity.
Hans Selye did research on rats confirming Walter Cannon's suggestion that prolonged stress could be physically harmful. No matter what stressor the rats were exposed to, he found that they all had a physical response. Adrenal glands became enlarged, stomach ulcers and weight loss occurred, and the thymus and lymph glands shrunk, which are key parts of the immune system. The general adaptation syndrome has 3 stages: alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. During the alarm stage, catecholamines are released by the adrenal medulla and intense arousal occurs. The body mobilizes internal physical resources to meet the demands of the stressor. During the resistance stage, physiological arousal lessens but stays above normal as the body tries to adapt to the stressful situation, and resistance to the situation is weakened. During the exhaustion stage, if the stress-producing event is still occurring, the symptoms of the alarm stage reappear but cannot be fixed again. The body's energy decreases and adaptation starts to break down, which leads to exhaustion, physical disorders, and possibly death. The most important parts of the immune system are the lymphocytes, which are white blood cells that fight bacteria, viruses, and other foreign invaders. They also work together with neurotransmitters and hormones, including catecholamines and cortisol, which both produce stress responses containing receptor sites for them. Psychological stress can actually increase the amount of time it takes for a wound to heal by around 40%. People who are experiencing high levels of stress are also more likely to get infections because chronic stress triggers the release of corticosteroids, which affect the immune system's functioning.
Chronic stress has been associated with diseases that come from aging and premature aging. This can be explained through the application of telomeres. Telomeres are repeated sequences of DNA on the ends of chromosomes and act to protect genetic data during cell division. Telomeres are prone to becoming shorter and therefore ineffective when a person ages. If premature aging is occurring from chronic stress, premature telomere depletion would also be occurring. Chronic stress is long-term and long-lasting stress that may arise from many different situations, commonly being associated with traumatic experiences. Acute stress is less likely to experience loss of telomere length because acute stress is short and sudden stress, which is less likely to cause premature aging. Scientific research is being conducted on the preservation of telomeres, but results have shown that vigorous exercise, which would release endorphins and reduce stress, can protect the shortening of telomeres. Psychological influences can affect stress and stress responses, and better learning how to control these influences can lead to better health and stress management. Individuals who practice optimistic explanatory styles when accounting for negative situations tend to experience less stress. This means that optimists will use external and specific explanations for negative events instead of shifting the blame to themselves. For example, if someone spilled a glass of milk, optimists would blame the floors for being slippery instead of internalizing negative feelings about themselves. Comparatively, pessimists would blame themselves and their clumsiness for their misfortune and in turn cause more stress in their lives. Optimists are more likely to cope in a healthy way when being exposed to stressors and enjoy the health benefits that may come from that. Of course, response to different situations may vary, but trying to maintain an optimistic explanatory style has proven to yield positive health effects. Similarly, individuals who are classified as type A, meaning that they were habitually anxious, hostile, and had behavior revolving around negative emotions, saw poor health effects and increasing stress, which ultimately could lead to diseases including heart disease. Individuals classified as type B, being more relaxed and focused on positive emotions, saw vastly different health effects and immune improvement. Psychological influences involved in stress response and coping are not the main or only determinants in adverse health outcomes, but managing psychological response in a positive and optimistic way will certainly offer protection from these health outcomes and aid in improved health.
First, lack of social support can decline one's physical health. For example, studies have shown that people who receive less care from their parents were much more likely to get a serious physical disease in the future. This leads to why having a diverse social network is extremely beneficial to one's health. People who have multiple types of relationships in their lives have been proven to have more resistance to respiratory infections, lower incidences of strokes and cardiovascular disease in high-risk women, and lower incidence of dementia and cognitive loss with old age. Other ways that social support benefits health is that knowing you have support can make stressful situations seem less threatening, decrease the intensity of physical reactions to a stressor, and overall make us less likely to experience negative emotions. Social support is also affected by gender. Men are more likely to rely on their partners, while women are more likely to rely on their close friends. Men are also more likely to experience social isolation because they normally have a smaller network of people to talk to, but women are more vulnerable to some of the negative sides of social support since they tend to have a larger social network. For example, women tend to be support systems, which can be extremely stressful. They're also more likely to experience the stress contagion effect, which happens when one becomes upset about the life events that happen to other people.
There are two types of coping strategies. Problem-focused coping strategies are coping efforts primarily aimed at directly changing or managing a threatening or harmful stressor. An example of this strategy is the planful problem-solving strategy, which involves efforts to rationally analyze the situation, identify potential solutions, and carry out those solutions. Another example would be confrontative coping, which is when people take a problem head-on. The other type of coping strategy is an emotion-focused coping strategy. It's a coping effort primarily aimed at relieving or regulating the emotional impact of a stressful situation. Some types of emotion-focused strategies include escape avoidance, seeking social support, distancing, denial, positive appraisal, positive religious coping, and negative religious coping.